What if the government protected powerful names but exposed the victims instead? Because what Jamie Raskin just revealed about the Epstein files should alarm every single American.
Hello, everybody. I've just gotten back from this Department of Justice satellite office, a seemingly otherwise desolate facility where they've set up some offices and some computers for us to go and review the Epstein files. I think there were 4 computers in the room that I was in. I was at one of the computers. Now, we're there because the members of the Judiciary Committee are very concerned because the most emphatic provision in the Epstein Files Transparency Act was that none of the survivors' privacy be compromised in any way. And we wanted to make sure that their names would be redacted and all personal identifying information would be redacted. But there are hundreds and hundreds of pages in the Epstein files that were recently released where identifying information about victims is right there, including people's names. So that was a dramatic departure from the demands of the statute. But then conversely, we didn't want to see any redactions of the names of co-conspirators, accomplices, enablers, abusers, rapists, simply to spare them potential embarrassment, political sensitivity, or disgrace of some kind. And yet, nonetheless, the Epstein file documents that were released are filled with redactions of names and information about people who clearly are not victims and may fall into that other category. So I went over there and I was able to determine, at least I believe, that there were tons of completely unnecessary redactions in addition to the failure to redact the names of victims. And so that's troubling to us.
Did you see the names of any potential co-conspirators that were redacted?
Well, I saw the names of lots of people who were redacted for mysterious or baffling or inscrutable reasons.
Are any of them well-known individuals?
For example, Mr. Wexner, his name was redacted from a government document, and I couldn't understand the logic of that. He was not a victim, and his name has appeared other places. Now, the Department of Justice has not sent forth its so-called privilege log, so it's not explained yet why there might be certain redactions that have been made. I saw one document which was an email that was sent by Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, which was the forward of an email that he had received from some of his lawyers, giving an account of a conversation between Epstein lawyers and Trump lawyers and others about what had taken place during that 2009 period. It was during the period of the 2009 investigation. And Epstein's lawyers synopsized and quoted Trump as saying that that Jeffrey Epstein was not a member of his club at Mar-a-Lago, but he was a guest at Mar-a-Lago, and he had never been asked to leave. And that was redacted for some indeterminate, inscrutable reason. I know it seems to be at odds with some things that President Trump has been saying recently about how he had kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club or asked him to leave, and this was at least one report that appears to contradict it.
What did you see specific to President Trump or President Clinton, and were there specific redactions to them?
Well, I just gave an example of one redaction related to President Trump. I did not see any redactions related to President Clinton.
What was
remember,
done in all this?
Well, I don't. Here's the thing: the Department of Justice is under orders from Congress to release the entire Epstein file. They released 3.5 million documents, and they've withheld 3 million documents. So about half of all the documents have not been released yet. Of the 3.5 million documents that have been released, I probably had the opportunity to review maybe 30 or 40 of them. Okay, so this is going to be an extremely time-consuming and painstaking process. The Attorney General and the Department of Justice have said that this process was something that was completed by them back in July. these materials could have been released long ago, but they're just being released now. And if every member of Congress who voted for the discharge petition, if all 217 of us spent every waking hour over at the Department of Justice, it would still take us months to get through all of those documents. And there are only 4 computers now, so they would certainly need to get a couple hundred more computers for all of the members. But the point is that there is no way before Attorney General Bondi arrives on Wednesday that we're going to have the opportunity to go through every redaction in order to ask thorough questions.
I think that's the connection, that they held up releasing this so that everybody wouldn't be as thoroughly prepared for her testimony Wednesday.
No, I think that the Department of Justice has been in a cover-up mode for many months and has been trying to sweep the entire thing under the rug. And the more deeply that I get into it, because obviously our colleagues on the Oversight Committee have taken the lead, but judiciary plays a very important role because we oversee the Department of Justice. But the more that I've gotten into it, the more I believe that the survivors here, the victims who are now active citizens for justice, really are leading the way. And we need to be having hearings with the survivors to hear from them about their experiences so they can explain what happened and so they can begin to set forth a theory of what took place. We need to be investigating the money. We need to be investigating the organizational hierarchy. There's no way you run $1 billion international child sex trafficking ring with just 2 people committing crimes, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. No way. It doesn't work like that. So we need to figure out what other conspiracies were involved, what other co-conspirators were involved. And I really do believe that listening to the survivors is going to be our pathway through this nightmare.
What is the next step for Democrats to take? You say there are obviously millions of documents, 4 computers. What is the next step? And
He walks out of a Department of Justice facility and immediately describes something that should stop us in our tracks. Not a transparent process, not an open investigation, but a controlled environment. Limited computers, limited access, and millions of documents that lawmakers are expected to somehow review under tight constraints. And that detail matters more than it seems. Because when you restrict access to information, you don't just slow down a process, you shape the outcome of it. Now let's get to the heart of what Raskin is saying, because this is where it becomes deeply disturbing. Congress passed a law with a very clear priority: protect the victims. That means redacting names, removing identifying details, making sure survivors are not re-traumatized or put in danger again. That's not political, that's basic human decency. But according to Raskin, that's not what happened. Instead, what he's describing is the exact opposite. Victims' names, people who were supposed to be protected, are appearing in these documents. Their personal information is exposed. And at the same time, the names of potential co-conspirators, enablers, people who may have had power or influence, those names are being hidden. Think about that imbalance. And if the system protects the powerful while exposing the vulnerable, then it's not just broken, it's working exactly the way it was designed to. That's the uncomfortable question this moment forces all of us to confront.